Hey team, welcome back to another episode of the Intentional Agribusiness Leader Podcast. This is your host, Mark Jewell, and today I'm on with Zachary Worden. He is the head of sales at Arable out there in California. Welcome to the show, man.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark, for having me. I really appreciate it.
Cool. What does it mean for you, Zach, to be intentional?
Listening to historical podcasts that you've got, and all the great leaders that you've had on, I've heard a lot of really good feedback, and I've kind of compiled and thought about myself and what I've done as a leader. And I think it just means to be targeted and objective and goal oriented. I think a person personally and organizationally need to have clear goals that they're trying to achieve, and then give themselves the true bandwidth to go create action and create the bandwidth to go and action on those goals.
Mm-hmm. This is now one of my favorite parts of the show because it's been out for a few months and people are starting to listen that are coming on the show. They're listening to some of the old episodes and finding out they know that question's coming, right? So it's like, hey, what should I say? What should I say? But this is good. And I like how intentional you work because there's three parts: targeted, objective, and goal oriented, right? And creating that within the space. So very good answer. Talk to us a little bit about yourself, your background, Arable, what you guys are doing in the market.
Yeah, absolutely. So like you said, based in California, specifically in Fresno. Went to California State University, Fresno, go Dogs. And about 10 years ago, graduated from there, and have been here in the Central Valley since then. Worked for a company called Agrian, and through acquisition to the Telus Ag Group, for about 9 years. And then just recently, in the past 7 months, made a change over to Arable. Came on as the head of sales here at Arable, and we've got some really great things going on in the environmental sensing world. We've got a deployable device that's collecting data sets and using it to empower better growing, research, and other outcomes for agriculture. So I'm super excited. Major change for me, as I was with a former business for almost 10 years, and then making the very first change in my professional career. But I'm loving it. I'm getting to meet a lot of really great people in a different part of the agribusiness industry, that I've gotten to be exposed to.
Cool, good for you, man. What kudos to you. I mean, 9 years with that first company out of university, like that's pretty rare in this day and age. So good to see the loyalty and longevity there. What do you find for you in the growing company that you're with, or maybe it was with the previous entity? What has worked in that talent retention, both for yourself and now what are you finding as a leader that's working?
For sure. Examples that I saw in past businesses and current business I'm in, and things that I like to emulate as a leader is really practice as you preach, and really lead by example. And they sound kind of really basic, but teams follow and want to be a part of things where leaders are living and breathing the goals that they've embodied, and the things that they want to accomplish. And doesn't mean you have to be shoveling with the teams every single day, but understanding what your teams are going through and how you can deliver things to them that would help empower them to achieve the goals you've set them out to go after. That builds confidence in people, and people want to work for people. They want to work for people that are not robotic. They can be charismatic, and nothing's more demoralizing than being asked to do something that that person's not willing to do themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. What would you say if you could give some advice to those folks that are maybe a little bit more experienced than you? Maybe they're 10, 20 years ahead of you from an experience perspective, but they're governing your generation in the
Mhm.
workplace. What good advice would you give them?
Yeah. Um, I think it kind of goes back to that, the practices you preach, right? And be clear about goals and objectives for your teams that you lead, right? And give your teams the tools and the logistical bandwidth to create goals and action those to hit what your organization wants to stand for. And then be okay with the environment that is created by the goals. And some things are a byproduct, right? If you're, a profitability and sales driven organization, as many agribusinesses are, but if you highlight sales as the key figure. You have to be okay with a competitive environment. You can't be not okay with the outcome of what people do to kind of help you hit your goals. I think that would be some of the biggest from a leadership perspective.
Cool, man. I like it. I like it. What are you doing to create that culture that you want to have that sustains the life that you need to grow the organization you're with right now?
Yeah. Culture is interesting. It's a relative word, really kind of means different things to different people. When you think about the hiring process and people coming on board, they want to know more about culture now versus, historical. It was more about things that they could bring. They want to understand what the company is going to be able to do for them, right? I think culture again needs to be a clear statement of the culture of who you want to be. But again, it's the consistency of that culture, constant training and coaching towards it. You don't want to say we're an organization that is service first, service oriented, but then you don't do a single thing daily, weekly, monthly to actually move towards being a service oriented organization, right? You want to set goals, give your teams tools and really a reward system based on the culture that you want to be. From a personal or a singular leader, just be a shining light within your organization, and you'll find, regardless if you manage hundreds of people or you manage zero people. I think some of the best leaders that I've encountered and people I've gotten to know really well are people that can be looked to as a shining example within an organization. And some of the best have managed, zero people in their career, right? They're just good leaders to look towards.
Hmm. Man, yeah, I like what you're getting at there, which the notes I wrote down as you're talking is be aligned with the culture that you say that you're building. A lot of people give culture lip service, but they don't actually put intention behind it. I was talking with Carrie Karstens of York Bioscience here just a little bit ago, and one of the things that she brought up was actually having metrics, key metrics that are representative of your culture. So if we say, hey, we're a service culture, we're a sales culture, we're whatever, we want to see this in our culture. Okay, well, what does it look like? What success looks like? Excuse me, what does success look like when that actually shows up in the environment? What's that look like? And then what metrics are you putting in place to measure to make sure that it does? Because if you don't measure it, then you can't manage it, as we all know. So I thought that was a really interesting take, and it's aligned with what you're saying, which is, hey, if you say you're going to do this, we should actually be able to see evidence of it in the workplace.
Evidence of it, and if you want to reinforce the culture and the culture wants to be talent retaining, and not this kind of revolving door, you need to give your teams the tools to be able to achieve them. That's, I think, the biggest thing that is missed.
Yeah, good stuff, man. I like it. Okay, well, talk to us a little bit about what's one of those big wins or hurdle. Well, let's start with win to start off with. What's been one of those big wins that you've had, early on in the career? Then we're going to go to hurdles.
Yeah, for sure. A lot of different things came to mind, and without getting into kind of specifics, of course there's big wins, like big deals that we've closed or good customer meetings that we've had and partnerships and things that are built, or even people that I've empowered to go close big deals. But I think the biggest win that continues to happen, which is really rewarding for me, is getting to see past team members, both people that have come and left an organization or even now that I've left one, and seeing those people at shows, them being potential customers that I can work with, and having them in interaction in meetings or just everyday life, and having a positive relationship with them, and really hearing feedback that I made an impact at some juncture in their career. That's got to be the most rewarding and biggest win that I've had, and continue to have, which is what I want to strive for.
Mhm. It's definitely common across all the different leaders I've interviewed. Those there's just something about being in leadership and then getting to that point in your career where you can see that it's making an impact, not just in like the things that you've accomplished, but how it's actually helping someone else to be able to carry that on. It's a very
Mhm.
human effect that I have been noting. It's one of those themes. If you listen to all the shows, like the really good leaders that we've had on, had really talk a lot about that. And I don't want to seed that for others in the future to, hey, just bring that answer to the table, but it's something to be measuring Hey, are you getting that kind of feedback? Are you excited when you see others succeed? Or do you get jealous, right? Or did you get mad because they're succeeding more than you are? Yeah, that's always good feedback from a leadership perspective. But what's been the biggest hurdle you've had to overcome so far?
Yeah. I think again, without it being a specific event, people coming through trials and tribulations in the workplace. I think generally, the big hurdle for me that helped excel me into a new kind of leadership and be looked at in a popular or in a favorable light is understanding how to deliver bad or unfavorable news and just not worrying about being unliked because of a difficult decision, right? I think what I've kind of learned over the past years is they're not going to dislike you or the company as a leader because of a decision that was made. They'll like how it was presented or dislike how it was presented to them. There's no clear statement as to why something is the way it is, and a clear plan of how you're going to make it better. Right? There's two different ways to deliver bad news, and if you go with the high route, which is this is us as a team. These are the problems we've had. This is the clear path for us to be able to make this better and to resolve these things in the future. That's something someone can get behind. Again, that helps with the talent retention and builds a culture that someone wants to be a part of versus delivery of news, which is here's a problem. Sorry about this, guys. And that's not someone, that someone wants to get behind. So
Mm.
being able to, sorry, to answer your question there, being able to kind of get over that hump and being able to deliver bad or unfavorable news in a good way, helped break through a lot of barriers that I had.
Yeah, that's an interesting answer. Maybe the first time anybody's brought that up, and I think it's really honest. That's easily one of the most challenging things that we have to do is maybe tell someone no, or we're not investing in that, or you're not getting hired, or you don't work here anymore, or I mean, there's lots of that. None of those things are fun. We don't. None of us wakes up in the morning saying, "Man, I can't wait to give bad news today."
Exactly. And yeah, I can't wait to get bad news or give it, right? But there's nothing more confidence inspiring, for you as a leader that you can do for your people is if a decision is made, you stand on that hill and you lead from the front and show that you are behind the decisions of the organization and reinforce those decisions versus ever contradict and drive some sort of wedge, right? That creates that animosity and a culture you would want to be a part of.
Happens a lot, doesn't it? Right? I mean, it really does.
Mm.
Because, well, let's be honest. If you're, let's say you're in a larger organization, decisions are going to get made that maybe you as a middle level manager leader don't like.
Mhm.
So now it feels really natural because you're going to take the side of your employees who probably also don't like this news. And so now what it does, and this has happened in almost every organization that I've ever worked with, we find this is there's a there's a distinct wedge between the field staff and what they call the head shed,
Mhm.
right? And I think that's it's those little things. I'm going to use a personal example to I'm just literally just talking through this right now, Zach. So roll with me. But when my wife and I brought our families together, she brought three kids. They're now 22, 20, and 18. So they're a little bit older. They're more on the adult side. 5 years ago, they were younger, obviously. But that's where they were when we started. And then, my kids are now 16, 14, and 8. And my kids are the ones that are at home, with us the most. The other three are adult children. They all have their own apartments, their own places. A couple of them live in a different country. It's wild. um, but what's interesting is, especially when you're bringing an organization like that together. Okay, and then her mother lives with us, so my mother-in-law's in the house. So that's 9 people in the organization. She and I have to be united on all the things. Even if we don't agree on something, we still have to find someplace that we can unite on how we're going to lead the house. Because especially when you have stepchildren, but really any children, they're going to look for ways to pit the one parent against the other parent, or say, well, my dad said it was okay, or my mom said it was okay, or whatever, right? Or they just don't talk to one of the other parents because that parent they know is not going to give them the answer they wanted. But isn't it interesting? We do the same thing in organizations. We do the same thing. We're petty children, right? Trying to get what we want. So we pit one leader against another leader, right? Until somebody ends up eventually relenting, or we just throw a tantrum, or we throw down, because we live in this adversarial culture and it's just easier to complain instead of working a little bit harder to get what you want.
Exactly. And I think the example is perfect. And if you look at back in the business world, like if you ever think about a time that times were tough during business, whether or not it was an internal or external conflict that was creating problems, you always remember the person who handled it with more grace than those who were hostile in those situations. The person that was level-headed, make an informed decision, stood behind that decision. That was the leader that you followed versus others who may have just been managers who just let things roll downhill. And I think that's a big part of, again, what we talked a little bit about working on as a leader is being that light, and that someone can then reference back to and remember as so as they grow and they lead. You want all of your kids to grow up, right? Not that others are children, but you used the family example. You want your kids to grow up to be good human beings and good leaders, and this is how you do that. I want my team members to grow up throughout their careers and be good leaders as well, and maybe lead me one day. That would be incredible. That's all you could ever want. So that's why I practice what I preach, and I want to help uplift team members in that regard.
Good observations, by the way, too. Very good stuff. So who's been someone you've admired then over the course of your career that's really helped out?
Yeah. I think both from a career and personal perspective, it's going to have to be my grandpa. He came from, absolutely nothing, was able to make his way through college, double majored in engineering and agriculture at Cal Poly. And that's really where my love for agriculture started. He worked in so many really cool parts of agriculture, the sugar plantations in Hawaii, feedlots in Southern California, large growing enterprises in the date gardens in the desert, before starting his own agribusiness, food production facility. And getting to see him climb from what was such a low to such a high, and like understanding his story, and then him getting to eventually pass the business on to my dad and his brothers, and see the work that they put in, the early hours, the late hours, and the work ethic that they put in to be leaders amongst themselves. I got to learn, over time, that people looked to my grandpa for leadership and looked to my dad for leadership. And that was super inspirational for me as I went into the business world. I want to continue to bring inspiration from that and instill those same qualities that I practice.
Good stuff, man. I like it. What a great example. What a
Yeah.
great example. What books have really helped out, or what book you're reading right now that you'd recommend?
Yeah. Oh, sorry, got cut off there.
Or I said, or podcasts for that matter.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I've been, this year specifically, had it hard pressed to be reading every night, or at least every other night. And I think the number one right now that I would say for leaders around, the agribusiness space, if to get yourself and personally right, and in a self-help perspective, 12 rules for life is awesome. Regardless of how you feel about Jordan Peterson, I think the qualities and what he talks about in the book are super important for things that you can help project confidence onto others, things that you can adjust personally, and enable yourself to hold yourself accountable and move, towards a life that you personally are happier with, professionally are happier with, because you can't be a leader, or at least an effective leader, unless your house is in order first. And I think this is a really great way to do that.
I love it. We agree with that too. Our whole Thriving Leader program is based not on the 12 rules for life, but on the idea that a thriving leader to be able to lead your people, your team, your family well, it's an inside out project.
Mm-hmm.
Big believer in that. Absolutely. Good stuff, man. What do you do to keep yourself optimized, both physically, mentally, emotionally, and from a productive perspective? How do
Yeah.
you keep your energy going?
Yeah. It's simple to say, much harder to do. Eat healthy, exercise, and get a good night's sleep. As simple as it is. I've yo-yoed with those things, and combinations of those things for a number of years. And once I finally found a good combination and a good balance of those things plus family, and then the rest is work, I've been extremely happy, and I feel like I can progress my career in that regard. When your mental and physical states are the best that they can be, then your work environment and the leadership and qualities that you instill in others are also going to be the best. And then just get excited about things, both in and out of work. People like to look for mentorship and like to work for people who talk about things they've got going on personally and get excited about your teams and what they've got going on personally, whether or not it's, life events or just general things. I think things have become extremely transactional over the past couple of years. It is, we join this call, I need to get this, you need to get this, and that's it. And we miss the 5, 10, 15 minutes beforehand that we were sitting in the conference room talking about what everybody did that weekend, right? And some of it can be, trivial and just for the sake of checking the box, but I feel like that personal connection has been cut off sometimes. So get excited about what other people are getting excited about. Ask for opinions, learn from others. People like to follow people that want to know more.
Yeah, dude, that is really insightful. Actually, everybody should just go back and listen to that answer for a minute. But it's really insightful to just be genuinely curious about other people. Interesting. Like where did we lose that? Everybody's looking for the next thing they get to say. It seems like, you know.
Listening to respond, things have become transactional. People have become weary of others. I don't know. I think a number of things, both political and just environmental, have created these environments over the past couple of years. But I'd like to get back to having good conversations with good people.
Mm. I think I've been talking about this with a couple of people today in other interviews that I've been doing. It's been coming up like it's interesting to just even get to be curious about the mindsets and the opinions of others that are different than mine. Like one of my stepkids is 22, has very different political ideals than I have. She grew up in Canada. So just a different upbringing altogether, very different. Didn't know her until she was an adult, so it's a very different. I didn't have much influence on the upbringing, and so we will sit and we will have conversations. And I'm just genuinely curious, like, where do you get your information? What do you listen to? Where does your programming come from? Where did that belief system come from? And rather than be judgmental, and I think, hey, you think socialism's been great, I think it's a terrible idea, and then we just sit here and we dig our heels in. you know so it just behooves us to sit down and be curious about other people and find out what's going on in their mind.
Yeah. And it doesn't mean you have to change your perspective, right, wrong, or indifferent. You're just hearing about somebody's experience and things that they've seen over their lives. And maybe it changes your point of view. Maybe it reinforces your point of view, right? But you won't know until you otherwise, engage in that.
Yeah. Well, I think you have to have your lens through which you view truth, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for me, the Bible has become, scripture is now that's the lens through which I focus truth. So if I'm having trouble discerning what's good, what's bad, what's true, what's not true, if I'm conflicted, I can go back to that as my dependable lens. But again, not everybody has that as their lens. So, but but as I read my lens, like it calls me to be curious, right? Not to be judgmental. Actually, there's a lot of rules in there, but it actually calls me to look at what does it say? Why are you obsessed over the speck in your brother's eye when you've got a log in your own? Right. So we have to be introspective, but we can still be curious, right, about what's going on with other people and look at other viewpoints. So good stuff, man. What's big for you on the growth perspective this year? What are you working on? What's one of your big things you want to advance with in your own personal growth?
Yeah. Big things that, I always want to be improving, always researching, trying to implement new strategies and be, smarter and more thoughtful. But I think the big thing that I've worked on this year is just being an owner of time and being more efficient and thoughtful to how I schedule things, right? I used to go just back to back to back to back to back meeting. And then you're into the night, nothing got accomplished. And you're overwhelmed, and your teams become overwhelmed at that point because you can't get to them and empower them, right? So through thoughtful prioritization, organization, I've been able to improve that. And I think that's something that's happened more recent in the years of coming on and doing Zoom and other platforms is white space on the calendar has enabled booking of meetings to go back to back to back. And we don't really quite know what we're accomplishing from hour to hour to hour. And I wanted to get back to here's what I need to do for the day. These are the things that take prioritization, barring any fire drills, and then go do those things.
Yeah. Good stuff, man. I like it. I like it. What with prioritization in mind, what are your tips for keeping the priorities? What works for you?
Yeah, I think the best, ways that I've gotten to maximize productivity, again, waking up early to start the day and starting out with something that's not work related and being able to clear the mind. Typically it's, gym, but it could be reading, gratitude, journaling, whatever it may be. They sound ticky tacky sometimes, but it really does make a difference when you practice it. And what I might call out to everyone that does listen, just try it. Whether or not it's at the beginning of the day, you journal or try reading and give it a couple of days. If you think it's silly, try something different, right? That's what we get to learn. And at the end of the day, if you have a dump list next to your bed and get everything out of your mind before you try to hit the pillow, that would be something else to try, right? Just grind it and find it until you find the best thing that's working right now for me to maximize productivity. It's waking up early and starting the day with something meaningful and task oriented, which is hit the gym, do one of these things. But I've also found myself when I do that, instead of sleeping in slightly or missing the alarm, whatever it is, I'm not chasing the rest of the day. When I get organized in the morning and get something out of the way, I feel like I've owned the day. When I wake up and I've got calls, Slacks, and emails, I'm in California, so West Coast, Pacific Standard Time, and so I'm chasing things from the Eastern and Central times that happened earlier in the morning, as well as things overseas because we're a global company. So I feel like I've already got things coming in from those areas, and I'm chasing the entire day. If I'm worried about those things, and I never find myself getting caught up, versus if I start it right and I'm organizationally and intentional throughout the day, I have the best outcomes for productivity.
Beautiful, good stuff. Yeah, and interesting concept, right? Bringing up being in California. My assistant is in California, so she's always 3 hours behind, where I start. So I might be putting Slack messages in at 3:30 in the morning her time, which is one of the reasons we went to Slack so that it wouldn't be pinging her text messages in the middle of the night while she's trying to get some sleep. Thank goodness she's got little kids. She gets up early, so I start getting some of those responses early. But that's not the expectation. That's how she chooses to handle her day that way. But I'll start getting responses by 8:30 my time in many cases. And so it's yeah, but not necessarily the expectation. That's just what works for her. But that's
Mhm.
you got to consider the multiple time zone world that we live in. Not everybody's on the same same time zone as you. So good. All right, last question before we bring it in. What how important is vulnerability?
Yeah. I think vulnerability in, creating an intentional environment and creating a culture, we have to be vulnerable and open to being okay with what the outcomes or results are of the culture we want to build. And if the culture is a lean, mean, fighting sales machine, you have to be okay with the outcomes of that, which is a highly competitive environment among salespeople. And being vulnerable and being open to those are the outcomes that we want, and these are the byproducts we're going to get.
Mhm.
I think that's going to be the biggest, and vulnerability and openness to learn and change is going to be what's going to help bridge the gap from you know current team members becoming leaders, as well as leaders passing the torch to future leaders in agribusiness. As agribusinesses are consolidating, going out of business, things are changing very, very rapidly in our space. And we need to hold on to that historical knowledge and pass the torch correctly. I think openness and willingness to learn is going to be the biggest going forward.
Well put, man. Well put. I like it. I like it. All right. How do we find out about Arable? How do we get connected with you?
Yeah, absolutely. You can learn more by going to arable.com. My contact information is on the website there. You can find me on LinkedIn as well. And that would be the best way to contact us going forward.
Good. All right, good stuff, man. All right, Zachary Worden, thanks for being on the show. Been fun to get to know you and get to look under the hood of you and the company a little bit.
Yeah. Thank you so much for the time, Mark. I really appreciate it.
You got it, brother.